Well, again, we have this idea of urgency, Now, before we get into too much of that, I just wanted to kind of do a quick little commercial again for some of the books on which this series is based. The series is a worship series that was put together by the Worship Design Studio. Dr. Marcia McPhee is a theologian and a musician, and she puts together series, and then there's just like the basics, and then the pastor then can write something here, can use this, can add something, whatever. So the basic of this, the main ideas are definitely from her, and I had the privilege of studying under her 2 springs ago in May out at Lake Tahoe. She had a 1-week worship conference. But the ideas, again, come from her basic understanding of the scriptures and the ideas, and then we then kind of just change them around to suit our needs and our particular situations. One thing that she did include were some books that perhaps would be helpful. And so I have read through these, and I really do think that they're very, very helpful. I hope you got a chance to read the cover of the November newsletter and also the December that was just sent out. But there's one thing we're talking about is contemplation and that whole idea of being present in the moment. And again, sometimes we think of that with other religions and not so much Christianity, but I think Jesus was very much living in the moment and encouraging us to do so. So when it's prayer time, we're going to kind of be experimenting around with that a little bit. So I'm thanking you ahead of time for your indulgence, because I really pray that it will open up your spiritual life, especially this Advent. But there are 2 books. The first one's called Right Here, Right Now, The Practice of Christian Mindfulness by Amy Ogden, O-D-E-N. And again, it's very short, but it has a lot in it. And then the second one is called Availability, The Challenge and the Gift of Being Present by Robert Wicks. And again, these were listed in our newsletter, but I will have these out. I'm still referring to them. I didn't really highlight them or anything, but I'm still referring to them, so I would rather not borrow them out. But if anybody really wants one and you can't find it at the library or purchase it, feel free to borrow one of these. But I just want to mention that I just think that would be, hopefully, something very meaningful. Something, it's kind of the opposite, right, of what the world tells us right now. What happens in Advent? Christmas time. We're crazy busy, right? We're running around doing 50 jillion different things. And instead, I'm kind of calling us to step back and to see if we can take some time for that mindfulness. Why do we do that? Well, there is some urgency, right? When we read these type of scriptures, when we read our scriptures, I think it was 2 weeks ago, right, from Mark, where, okay, so, hey, here comes the bride. The bridegroom is coming, ladies. Light your lamps. What do you mean you don't have any oil, right? There is some urgency to many scriptures, and again, we think, oh, okay, well, Jesus is coming soon. Well, it's been 2,000 years. Well, it's probably going to be another. Okay, who are we to be able to say probably going to be, right? If even the angels don't know when Christ's second coming is. So there is absolutely some urgency that we kind of lose out with sometimes, just in daily lives of letting other things get in priority. So take a second, and if you want to close your eyes, you're welcome to, but I'm going to set up a picture. So you're in a canoe, and you're canoeing around, right? I'm thinking a lot about kayaking because that's one of my goals in my therapy is to try to be able to do that, right, for this spring. So you're in a canoe. It's a beautiful day, right? But it's kind of getting a little bit windy, but you're canoeing, and there's a couple little rocks, but you're being careful. You're kayaking. But all of a sudden, the unthinkable happens, and your canoe or your kayak hits a rock, and it tips you over. And you don't have your life jacket on. Well, you're an okay swimmer, so it's not too big of a thing. But you know what? You can't reach the bottom. And suddenly there's all these, you've hit some rapids, and all of a sudden this water is just carrying you, right? And your head goes under, and then your head goes under again. And you come up gasping for breath. And all you can think of is, again, is how am I going to get out of this? How on earth is this ever going to come right? And maybe you find yourself thinking, oh my gosh, I was with my friend over at the shore. If they can just throw me a rope, that's all I'm going to need. And then they throw a rope. And you just, okay, I've got one shot, because there they are, and I'm going so fast, quick by it. And you grab onto that with every ounce of strength that you have. And then they pull you to shore, right? Now, that's how you normally see it, right, in movies and that sort of thing, right? But sometimes we know that in real life, those things don't happen, that, okay, here comes the rope, and you miss it, right? So we know that, as we said to the kids, just because we have hope doesn't mean that every time that everything in life is perfect. We as adults especially, and even our children know it, that's not how life is. But yet at the same time, we know, though, that there is someone throwing a rope to us, right? We know that that's God, and that Jesus is there, and that we can get through all things, even the most horrific times, because we can see the long road. We can see life after life here, and that we can see that love that God has for us, that we are precious to him. Maybe some of you are holding on to the end of your rope today. Maybe you can think of a time when you lost your job, or you didn't have the resources to make ends meet, or the day your spouse left, saying your marriage was over. Or maybe when your health began to diminish and healing didn't look likely. Have you ever felt like you were holding on to the very end of that rope? Like, if I let go of this rope, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Maybe you've seen the movie The Incredible Shrinking Woman. It's one of Lily Tomlin's movies. I didn't look at the date, but I know it's pretty old. I don't know if any of you have ever had a chance to see that, and I can't really remember it, but somehow she ends up shrinking. It's kind of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but she shrinks. So she's in her kitchen sink, and there's water going, and she's going towards the garbage disposal, right? And all of a sudden, at the last second, she grabs onto the rope, except it's not rope, it's spaghetti, right? It's spaghetti. I think of that whenever I'm cleaning out my sink after I've made pasta. Like, maybe I should leave one of these strands still in here, right? But she clings to this piece of pasta, right, as her rope, praying and hoping that someone will see her in her plight and save her. And maybe it's more like that, Maybe we are not at the end of our rope, but at the end of a piece of overcooked pasta. I don't know. But we can be doing that, right? Holding on for dear life, fearful that it's all going to fall apart. In the book of Isaiah, we read several different accounts and somewhat, if I can say it, pushy prayers by the prophet on behalf of his people. They felt that they're at the end of their string of overcooked pasta, that they have this feeling of hopelessness and despair, and who could blame them? The prophet forgoes any sort of restraint. He says, oh God, you would literally tear apart the heavens and come down, if you would only do that to save us. And again, if we consider, we know again what the prophet was going through, right? The exile of Israel had ended, but there were still challenges facing the Israelites from the very beginning after captivity in Babylon. And then returning to the promised land, their home had been devastated, fields laid waste, Jerusalem destroyed, also the temple, right? The temple of God just in rubble. And so the people were at the end of their rope and nearly devoid of any hope. And for those of you who have been in that situation, being nearly devoid of all hope, you know that's a horrible place to be. It was as if Israel no longer belonged to God. And again, we think about our Israeli brothers and sisters, even here in America, that are going through so much hate now. There always has been, we know, unfortunately, a level of anti-Semitism, but now we see it even more and more. I think the figures are like, I should even try to do. I will email them to you, but it's just so disproportionate, the number of hate crimes going on right now against our Jewish brothers and sisters. And again, not just them. We see it for all the different hate groups and hate crimes, especially on social media, that we see. That hate is so prevalent, of people saying us and the other. and the right and the wrong, the correct people and the lesser people, right? So this prophet's pushy prayer, again, some say that it's Isaiah, moves beyond this tearful lament and then reminds God about all the different things that God has done in the past. And again, we think about all of that. We know in the old scriptures, in the Old Testament, oh God, you have saved us. We hear it in the Psalms all the time. You did this. You've done this before for me, so help me out. And how many times do we do that as well, right? When we're having a difficult time, take a deep breath. Okay, I've been in a situation similar to this before, and it all worked out, right? Or it didn't work out so well, but God was with me, and I felt that presence and strength, and I was able to get through that. So that's always a good idea, to hang on to those memories, because again, that's not just a memory, but it's a time to give thanks to God for how he has gotten us through before. And again, in the scriptures, we read that over and over. How you've cared for us before, God, how you led us out of Egypt, how you led us out of the wilderness. And then the kind of prayer kind of always ends, do it again, please, do it again, please. So dare we exhibit the same kind of faith. Dare we trust in God's providence, even when our life seems full of despair. And again, I don't know where you are today. Maybe you're not, maybe things are going really well, but I'll bet you know a lot of people who that's not the case. And even if you don't know them, if you just open up your news feed, you're going to see all kinds of groups of people that are in despair right now. Dare we believe that God can still work in the world through the church despite all the change and the cultural upheaval that we see taking place in our society? You know, we always say this, right? It's easy to trust God when things are going well, right? Sometimes we kind of forget to pray because things are going well, and maybe that's because of all the good choices that I've made, right? And we have a tendency to like take on those, not the blame, but the opposite. We think, oh, okay, well, that's all because of me doing these different things, right? But then when things lay in ruins, suddenly our hearts are just laid bare, and we know that we cannot do it alone, and we know that we need God. You've probably seen that poem, The Hyphen. I'm not going to read it because we put it once on our newsletter, and it was not a good situation. But George Butrick said this. He says, our lives are as brief as the hyphen between the dates on the gravestone. And maybe you've heard of that, or you've read other poems about that hyphen, right, between a birth of something and the death of something. Traditionally, it's a person, right? But we always have to ask ourselves, are we living our hyphen fully? And again, we can get so busy with life doing other things that we sometimes can miss out. And that's a good question. I think it's a good question for each of us to ask, especially this Advent season as we are called to be more contemplative. Are we living that hyphen between when we were born and whenever it is that we are out from this world? Are we living that fully? And then we say the same thing, I think we should, for our church as well. Every church should ask themselves that same question. We exist right now between the date of the church's birth, and we've been celebrating that all year long, right? And then the date when this congregation will no longer exist. I don't know if that'll be because of Christ's second coming and the world will end. I don't know if that's going to be 2 years from now or 200 years from now or 2,000 years from now, right? Nobody knows. And we don't need to know. All we need to do is ask ourselves, are we living that hyphen fully? Are we doing everything that we can every day as individuals and as a church to help other people, to show Christ's love to all people? And at this moment, you know, it's difficult. At one moment, the world seems pregnant with possibilities, right? As Mary, we're going to be reading about next week, right, becomes with child. But then in the next moment, we're splashing around in water over our head, right? Wondering how we're ever going to make it. Are you living with abundant joy and courageous faith? Are you doing all that you can to make an impact on your corner of the world, to help others to live with abundant joy as much as they are able in their circumstances? Are you living with a bold vision of what God wants to do through you? The Gospel of Mark, this last scripture reading, tells a parable about this wealthy landowner, right? He went on a trip. And here's what's interesting. You know, while he's away, the landowner leaves the entire responsibility of running the business in the hands of his servants. The meaning is clear, right? Jesus Christ is the absentee but returning master. And we, as the church, live in the hyphen between the first and second coming of Christ. So until Jesus comes, the work of the kingdom, guess what? It's entrusted to us. It's entrusted to all of us. And so we're told, stay on your toes, everybody. Keep awake. Be on your guard. The master may return at any time, day or night. Don't let him sneak up on you and find you asleep. Mark says, keep awake. Keep awake. So maybe we feel like we're at the end of our rope, but you know, the reality is for many in our world, they don't even have a rope. They do not even have a rope to hang on to. They are truly without hope. And unless we are faithful and can share the hope of Christ with them, they may never experience God's salvation. The Master has entrusted the work to each of us. You know that poem, right? There are no hands but yours, right? Teresa of Avila. But just take a second, if you don't mind. I'm asking you to do a couple of things maybe out of your comfort zone today. So here's another one, or one of them. Take a second and just look at your hands. Can you just hold your hands up just real quick and look at them? You don't have to, but I think it would be kind of cool. Just look at your hands. Look at those capable hands. Maybe your hands are a little bit more wrinkly than they used to be, right? Maybe they have some stains on them because you've been working or you were doing some crafts, right? Maybe your nails are a little unkempt. Maybe you have Disney nails still. Okay, but it doesn't matter. Look at those hands and realize that the work of the kingdom is entrusted to those hands. Yours are the hands through which God ministers to victims of hurricanes and earthquakes. Yours are the hands with which God builds homes for the homeless. Excuse me. Yours are the hands through which God shares water with the thirsty and food with the hungry. Yours are the hands through which God works to bring peace in a world of conflict and war. Yours are the hands which God embraces and binds up the brokenhearted. Yours are the hands that can point the way to Jesus. Sometimes we feel like we're just using those hands to just hang on to the end of our own rope, right? I can't do a thing for anybody right now because I can barely keep myself together. God understands that. God understands and is with you. Isaiah told God all about it on our behalf. God understands. But thankfully, we do have the rope. Well, actually, we don't have the rope. The rope has us. It's stronger than we think, and it will never fail us. God's love. It's not a rope that we need to hang on to. Picture it, you're in that water, and here comes a lasso that just goes right around your body and then tightens up. So even if you are struggling, that rope's still going to pull you into safety and to shore. That's what we're going to talk about this Advent season. The gift of being present, the gift of being loved and trusting God in our circumstances, and the gift of being that same rope of hope and love and mercy and kindness, fill in the blank, to other people. Stay alert. Allow God to use you as his hands in this world. Amen.